At the end of the day, man, having a boyfriend ain't gonna work.
I just want to let y'all know I found someone that I never want to lose. Myself, bitch. What the fuck you thought this was? I give a fuck about these people.
A teenage boy walks into his father's Fort Lauderdale apartment, expecting to find answers. For 5 days, Jason Bloomfield has been missing. His bank account shows activity, money moving around, but nobody has seen him.
Y'all are blessed to have me. I don't give a fuck what you talking about. You are fucking blessed.
His girlfriend, Veanitta Lenon, keeps giving different stories about where he is, each one more confusing than the last.
It's 3 reasons why I don't like people asking me questions. Because I like to fight, and I like to fight. Leave me.
The boy pushes past a couch that seems oddly placed against the bedroom door. What he finds behind that furniture will haunt him forever. This is a story of how jealousy turned deadly, how a woman lived with her victim's decomposing body for nearly a week, and how she almost got away with it.
Let me tell you something. Real women don't call themselves bad bitches, Barbies, or dimes. Because real men don't carry change, play with toys, or wife dogs. Message.
Jason Bloomfield was a father, a boyfriend, and a man who thought he knew the woman he was living with. He had no idea that Veanitta Lenon's jealousy had reached a breaking point that would cost him everything. 5 days. That's how long Jason's family searched for him, while Veanitta pretended he was still alive. 5 days of lies, deception, and a secret so disturbing that when the truth finally came out, it shocked everyone who knew them. The bank record showed Jason's account was active. Money was being transferred. Transactions were happening. To anyone looking at the financial activity, it seemed like Jason was going about his normal business. But his mother and his teenage son knew something was wrong. Jason wasn't the type to disappear without explanation, especially not for days at a time. When family members called asking where Jason was, Veanitta had answers. Different answers each time. First, he was at work. Then he was with friends. Later, she claimed he had gone out of town. The stories kept changing, but Veanitta always had an explanation ready. What his family didn't know was that every phone call, every text message supposedly from Jason, every bank transaction, it was all coming from Veanitta. She had his phone. She had access to his accounts. And she was using both to create an elaborate illusion that Jason was still alive. But Jason wasn't alive. He hadn't been alive for 5 days. While his family worried and searched and called around looking for him, Jason's body was decomposing in a small bedroom in the very apartment where Veanitta was sleeping, eating, and going about her daily routine. She had barricaded the door with a couch, but that was the only barrier between her and the evidence of what she had done. The smell must have been overwhelming. The reality of what she was living with must have been unbearable. Yet somehow, Veanitta continued her charade, continued pretending that everything was normal, continued lying to everyone who asked about Jason. What drove her to kill the man she claimed to love? What made her think she could hide his body and get away with it? And how did she manage to live in that apartment, knowing what was behind that bedroom door? The answers to these questions reveal a story of obsessive jealousy, carefully planned deception, and a crime that almost worked. Stay tuned as we reveal everything about this case. Drop a comment and let me know what you think about this story. Welcome to our channel. Make sure to hit the subscribe button. Like and share this video to help raise awareness and spread caution. Let's begin. When Jason's son finally discovered the truth, it wasn't because Veanitta's plan failed. It was because a family's love and concern overcame her lies. This case shows us how quickly domestic situations can turn deadly, how financial manipulation often goes hand in hand with violence, and how the people closest to us can sometimes be the most dangerous. What happened in that Fort Lauderdale apartment over those 5 days will show you just how far someone will go to cover up their crimes, and how a mother's intuition and a son's determination can expose even the most carefully constructed lies. Jason Bloomfield was living what seemed like a normal life in Fort Lauderdale. He was a father who maintained a relationship with his teenage son, a man who stayed connected to his family, and someone who worked to support himself and contribute to the household he shared with Veanitta Lenon. Jason and Veanitta had been living together, sharing an apartment and what appeared to be a committed relationship. Like many couples, they had their challenges, But to the outside world, they seemed to be building a life together. Jason trusted Veanitta enough to share financial access with her, a decision that would later enable her elaborate deception. The relationship dynamic between Jason and Veanitta had shifted over time. What may have started as normal couple disagreements had evolved into something more controlling and threatening. Veanitta's jealousy wasn't just emotional. It was becoming aggressive and focused. Jason worked regularly and maintained his financial responsibilities. He had bank accounts that he accessed normally, and his spending and financial patterns were consistent and predictable. This routine would later make the unusual account activity after his disappearance even more suspicious to those who knew him well. As a father, Jason had responsibilities and connections that meant people expected to hear from him regularly. His son relied on him. His mother stayed in touch, and he had established patterns of communication that people counted on. When those patterns suddenly changed, the people who loved him noticed immediately. The apartment he shared with Veanitta was their shared space, a place where they had built their life together. It had a small bedroom that would later become central to crime, an open living area where they spent their time together. The layout of this apartment would play a crucial role in both the murder and the attempted cover-up. Jason had no way of knowing that Veanitta's jealousy had reached dangerous levels. He couldn't have predicted that her threats were becoming more than just words. He was living with someone who was planning violence, but he had no idea what was coming. His daily routine, his financial habits, his communication patterns with family. All of these normal aspects of Jason's life would later be manipulated by Veanitta as she tried to make it appear that he was still alive. She knew his world well enough to imitate it, at least temporarily. The man who went about his normal day had no idea it would be his last. The father who expected to see his son again would never get that chance. Jason Bloomfield was about to become the victim of a crime that would shock everyone who knew him. Veanitta Lenon's jealousy wasn't secret. The people around Jason and Veanitta had witnessed her behavior firsthand, and what they saw was deeply concerning. This wasn't typical relationship jealousy. This was something far more dangerous and threatening. Veanitta had made direct threats about Jason. These weren't vague statements made in the heat of an argument. They were specific, targeted threats that indicated she was thinking about violence. The people who heard these threats recognized them as serious warning signs, but perhaps nobody fully understood how serious they were.
At the end of the day, man, having a boyfriend ain't gonna work.
Y'all are blessed to have me. I don't give a fuck what you talking about. You are fucking blessed.
Veanitta's threats weren't made in private, where they could be dismissed as relationship drama. She was making these statements in front of other people, which suggests either that she wanted witnesses to her anger or that she had lost control of her ability to keep her violent thoughts to herself. The progression from jealousy to threats is a well-documented pattern in domestic violence situations. What makes this case particularly tragic is that multiple people were aware of Veanitta's threatening behavior, yet Jason still ended up dead. This highlights how difficult it can be to protect someone from domestic violence, even when warning signs are clearly visible. The murder happened in the living room of the Fort Lauderdale apartment that Jason and Veanitta shared. This was their common space, the area where they spent time together, where they had conversations and shared meals. It was also where Veanitta made the decision to end Jason's life. Veanitta shot Jason multiple times. This wasn't a single gunshot in the heat of an argument. She fired multiple rounds, ensuring that Jason would not survive the attack. The multiple gunshots indicate that this was a deliberate, determined act of violence, not an accidental shooting or a single moment of lost control. The living room became a crime scene filled with evidence of what had happened. Blood stained the floors and furniture, creating physical proof of the violent attack. Jason's body lay where he had been shot, and Veanitta was left with the immediate challenge of dealing with the evidence of her crime. What Veanitta did next reveals the calculated nature of her actions. Rather than calling for help, rather than reporting what had happened, rather than showing any remorse for what she had done, she immediately began working to cover up the murder. Veanitta dragged Jason's body from the living room to a small bedroom in the apartment. This was an easy task. Moving a dead body requires significant physical effort, but Veanitta was determined to hide what she had done and she was willing to do whatever was necessary to conceal Jason's body. After moving the body to the bedroom, Veanitta took the additional step of barricading the door. She moved a couch in front of the bedroom entrance, creating a physical barrier that would prevent anyone from accidentally discovering Jason's body. This wasn't just about hiding the body. It was about making sure no one could access that room. The blood evidence in the living room had to be addressed if Veanitta wanted to maintain the illusion that nothing had happened. She cleaned up the bloodstains, removing the physical evidence of the shooting from the main living area. This cleanup was thorough enough that casual visitors to the apartment wouldn't immediately notice signs of violence. Moving the couch to block the bedroom door required planning and physical effort. Couches are heavy, bulky pieces of furniture that aren't easily moved by one person. The fact that Veanitta was able to position it as a barricade shows that she was thinking clearly about how to conceal her crime, even immediately after committing murder. The small bedroom where Jason's body was hidden became a sealed-off space within the apartment. With the door blocked by furniture and the room inaccessible, it was transformed from a normal living space into a makeshift tomb. Jason's body would remain in that room for the next 5 days, while Veanitta continued living in the apartment. For 5 days, Veanitta Lenon lived in the apartment with Jason Bloomfield's decomposing body. The small bedroom where she had hidden his corpse was sealed off by the couch she had moved against the door, but that furniture was the only barrier between her and the evidence of her crime. The physical reality of what Veanitta was living with during those 5 days is almost incomprehensible. A human body begins decomposing immediately after death, and the smell would have been noticeable within hours. By the 2nd day, the odor would have been strong. By the 5th day, it would have been overwhelming. Yet somehow, Veanitta maintained her daily routine while sharing her living space with a decomposing corpse. She slept in that apartment, ate her meals there, and went about her normal activities while Jason's body lay rotting behind a couch in the next room. But Veanitta wasn't just enduring the physical horror of living with a dead body. She was actively working to make it appear that Jason was still alive. She had taken a cell phone and was using it to send messages that would maintain the illusion that he was going about his normal business. The messages sent from Jason's phone during those 5 days were all composed by Veanitta. She was impersonating him, responding to friends and family members who tried to reach him, creating fake conversations that would explain his absence without raising suspicion. Veanitta also had access to Jason's bank account, and she used this access to create financial activity that would suggest he was still alive. She transferred money from his account to her own account, making it appear that Jason was handling his financial affairs normally. These money transfers served 2 purposes for Veanitta. First, they created evidence that Jason was still active and managing his finances. Second, they gave her access to his money, which she could use for her own expenses while she figured out her next steps. When family members and friends called asking about Jason's whereabouts, Veanitta had ready explanations. She told different people different stories about where he was and what he was doing. These lies were elaborate and detailed, designed to satisfy each person's specific concerns about Jason. To Jason's mother, Veanitta might claim he was working late or had picked up extra shifts. To his friends, she might say he was dealing with personal issues and needed space. To other family members, she might suggest he had gone out of town for a few days. Each lie was tailored to the person asking. The consistency of these lies would have been almost impossible to maintain over time, but Veanitta managed to keep her story straight for 5 days. She was juggling multiple false narratives, while also dealing with the physical and psychological stress of living with Jason's body. During this time, Veanitta was also preparing for the possibility that she would be questioned about Jason's disappearance. She began constructing alibis and alternative explanations that would protect her if law enforcement became involved. One of the alibis she prepared involved claiming that Jason had been cheating on her and had left to be with another woman. This story served multiple purposes. It explained why he was gone. It painted him in a negative light that might make people less sympathetic to his disappearance, and it positioned Veanitta as the victim rather than the perpetrator. As the days passed without direct contact from Jason, his family members grew increasingly worried. The man they knew would never disappear without explanation, especially not for this long. Their concerns were about to expose the elaborate deception that Veanitta had been maintaining. Jason's mother and his teenage son were particularly troubled by his absence. They knew his habits, his communication patterns, and his sense of responsibility. The Jason they knew would not leave his family wondering about his safety and whereabouts for days at a time. When family members pressed Veanitta for more specific information about where Jason was and when he would return, her stories began to show inconsistencies. The different explanations she had been giving to different people were starting to contradict each other as more people compared notes. The bank account activity that had initially suggested Jason was handling his financial affairs normally was beginning to look suspicious to those who knew him well. The timing and nature of the transactions didn't match his usual patterns, and the money transfers to Veanitta seemed unusual. Jason's family decided they needed to involve law enforcement. Their concerns had reached a point where they felt police intervention was necessary to determine what had happened to Jason and where he was. Jason's teenage son and his mother made the decision to go to the Fort Lauderdale apartment to look for him themselves. They had waited long enough for answers, and Veanitta's contradictory explanations were no longer sufficient. They needed to see for themselves what was happening. When they arrived at the apartment, they found Veanitta present, but Jason was nowhere to be seen. The living room appeared normal. Veanitta's cleanup efforts had been successful in removing visible signs of violence from the main living area. But Jason's family members noticed something odd about the furniture arrangement. A couch had been positioned against the bedroom door in a way that seemed unusual and deliberate. The placement didn't make sense from a decorating or practical standpoint. Jason's son and mother decided to move the couch to access the bedroom behind it. They had no idea what they were about to find, but they were determined to search every part of the apartment for clues about Jason's whereabouts. When they moved the couch away from the bedroom door and opened the room, they discovered Jason's decomposing body. The small bedroom that had been sealed off for 5 days contained the horrific evidence of what had really happened to him. The scene they encountered was devastating. Jason had been dead for 5 days, and his body showed clear signs of decomposition. The smell that Veanitta had been living with was overwhelming, and the reality of what they were seeing was almost incomprehensible. This was the moment when Veanitta's elaborate deception finally collapsed. There was no explaining away the presence of Jason's dead body in their shared apartment. All of her lies, all of her fake text messages, all of her false alibis, everything fell apart in the face of this physical evidence. Jason's family members immediately called police to report their horrific discovery. The investigation that had been building around Jason's disappearance suddenly became a murder case with clear evidence of who was responsible. Veanitta Lenon was immediately arrested following the discovery of Jason Bloomfield's body. The evidence against her was overwhelming. His corpse was found in their shared apartment, hidden behind furniture she had moved, and she had been using his phone and bank accounts for days after his death. The charges against Veanitta included murder and identity fraud. The murder charge reflected the fact that she had killed Jason, while the identity fraud charge addressed her use of his phone and financial accounts to impersonate him after his death. When faced with these serious charges, Veanitta entered a plea of not guilty. Despite the physical evidence, despite being caught living in the same apartment as the victim's hidden body, despite the clear proof of her financial manipulation, she maintained her innocence. The court denied Veanitta bond, which meant she would remain in custody throughout the legal proceedings. Given the nature of the crime and the evidence against her, the court determined that she posed too great a risk to be released pending trial. During the trial, prosecutors presented the evidence of Veanitta's 5-day deception following Jason's murder. The jury heard testimony about the threatening behavior witnesses had observed, the physical evidence from the crime scene, and the elaborate cover-up that followed the killing. The trial ultimately resulted in a conviction for second-degree murder. The jury found that while Veanitta had indeed killed Jason Bloomfield, the specific circumstances didn't meet the criteria for first-degree murder, which typically requires premeditation and planning. The murder of Jason Bloomfield by Veanitta Lenon reveals several critical lessons about domestic violence, jealousy, and the warning signs that can predict when relationships become deadly. The progression from jealousy to threats to actual violence that occurred in this case follows a pattern that domestic violence experts recognize as extremely dangerous. Veanitta's behavior escalated gradually, but each step in that escalation should have been seen as a serious warning sign. The The 5-day timeline in this case shows how quickly someone can disappear and how important it is to report missing persons immediately when behavior is out of character. Jason's family's quick action in involving law enforcement helped ensure that the truth was eventually discovered. Jason Bloomfield deserved better than the violent end he received. His memory should serve as a reminder that domestic violence can happen to anyone, and that the warning signs should never be ignored. His family's courage in seeking the truth ensured that justice was served and that Veanitta Lenon was held accountable for her crimes. The lessons from this case could save lives if people recognize the patterns and take action when they see similar warning signs in their own communities.